Welcome everybody to this series where I'll be walking you through how to build a full stack application from the ground up using a couple of my favorite technologies, which are Remix, Tailwind CSS, MongoDB, and of course Prisma. Once we get done with our application, we'll be deploying it using Vercel, and somewhere along the lines we're also going to use AWS S3 to build an image upload component. Throughout this series, we're going to really focus on how easy it is to get all of these technologies working together and to get something built and deployed quickly without requiring a whole lot of knowledge on how the backend infrastructure works. A lot of these tools take care of that for you. So let's go ahead and jump in and see what application we're building. Okay, so when you first open up Kudos, which is the name of our application, you're going to see this nice login screen where a user can log into their account. And up in the top right corner, we have this sign up button, which toggles the form. In that case, we'll be able to sign up, and that will send us to the home page. If I do log in here, we will land on this home page, and this is where all the meat and bones of the application is. We've got a users list over here on the left side where you can click on a user and send them kudos. And if you aren't sure what that term is, it's basically congratulations or just saying something nice to somebody. And that's what this whole application is based off, is sending that to other users of the website. So yeah, you can type in something here. I'll just say great job. And down here you'll see a live preview of whatever post we're going to send. You can change some of its styles up a little bit, give it an emoji for a little more context, and then hit send. And when you hit send, that will send the kudos to whichever account you decided to send that to. And you'll see it pop up over here in the recent kudos section on the right side. So we could see I sent one to Maddie, so it's one of the more recent ones. And this will just show the top 3. Here in the middle, I'll see any kudos that people have sent to me. And then I can search and filter those, as well as do some sorting. And then the last piece is this profile settings section up here, where you can change your first name, your last name, the department you work in, and you can upload a profile picture. And then also here you've got this delete account button, and that'll go ahead and delete your account along with any related data to that account. Yeah, so that's pretty much the whole application. There's a good amount of pieces that are going to go into this, and we're going to go into detail on how to build each piece. I'll be walking through all the various React components, all the Prisma queries, setting up AWS S3 for the image upload, and basically anything related to building this application. We're going to be sure to cover it in detail so you'll know how to do this on your own. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. The first step is going to be scaffolding out our Remix project, so we'll go ahead and get that going right now. Okay, to start off our application, we're going to use Remix's CLI tool that sets up the basics for us. It gives us a couple of files and a couple of configuration files that are pre-set up for what we'll need. But before we do so, you're going to want to make sure to have Node.js installed on your machine if it's not already. This application will be using a lot of Node, and the CLI tool itself requires Node to run, so that'll be a necessary piece. And once that's installed, go ahead and just come back to this video and continue along with us. We're going to run the command npx create-remix at latest. And this will give you the latest version of the CLI tool, and it's going to ask where you want to create your application. I'm doing it in the current directory, and I'll call the folder kudos. And then here we see a couple of options. There's an option for a pre-configured stack, and this will be a more fleshed out boilerplate project for us that might have something like authentication installed already, or maybe a template. But we just want the basics. We want a clean slate to work with because we're going to build everything from the ground up by ourselves. So go ahead and select that. We do plan to deploy to Vercel, so you can select that option. That is changeable later on, but we won't need to touch any of that configuration. And then, yeah, go ahead and run the npm install right now. And this might take a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and pause the video, and I'll be right back once it's done. All right, that did its thing. All of our packages are now installed, and we're left with one more question here, and that's whether to use TypeScript or JavaScript. We're going to pick TypeScript because we want to make use of Remix and Prisma's types that they generate for us. So go ahead and hit that option. And yep, that's it. It gives us an instruction here to cd into the directory, so we'll go ahead and follow that, cd kudos. And then I'm using VS Code, so I'm going to run code dot to open up the project, but feel free to open it in whichever editor you're more comfortable with. Cool, so once you've got that opened, you're going to see this basic project structure here. We have an app folder, and within that we're going to see a routes folder, and we'll dive a little bit later on into how Remix handles routing and a couple of its other internals, but just good to know right now this index file will be the base route of our application, and it just has a basic starter template that they give you. There's also a root.tsx file, and this is where the HTML head and body tags are. So this is where our application gets rendered into and what is sent to the browser. So this will be an important file, and we are going to use that one in just a little bit here. We also have a couple of configuration files, and we won't really touch those in this series. We are going to add a few in this video and modify those, but these ones here we're not going to really touch. They are pretty much set out how we need them. So those are looking good. Let's go ahead and pop open the README so that we can see what Remix has to say about this project. You'll see here a couple of deployment instructions, which is pretty nice. They sort of give you a little guide on how to get your application deployed. And then this development section, this is what we're going to use right now. This will show you how to install the modules in your application and how to run the application. So let's go ahead and follow that. We're going to do npm run dev. And that should start your application up on localhost 3000, unless you already had something running on that port, in which case it would open up a random port. So let's go ahead and pop that open. And yeah, this is what you're going to get. You're going to see this welcome to Remix with a couple of links here. And this is nice. This means our application is up and ready to be modified. I think the first thing that we're going to want to do to get our application started is set up Tailwind CSS. That way we can get some custom styles going and start to flesh out a little bit of what we want the application to look like. So let's go ahead and get that going here. Fortunately for us, Tailwind CSS has a nice guide on setting up Tailwind with Remix actually. So we're just going to follow these instructions and let's get going on that. So we've already created our project. We've seeded it into the project. Now we just need a couple of these dependencies. So I'm going to copy this over and I'll talk a little bit about what these are as they're installing. I'll stop the dev server, paste that in. And so yeah, this is going to install Tailwind CSS's CLI, which will allow us to run build processes through their CLI tool. And then PostCSS is next. Tailwind is really a PostCSS plugin, and so we're going to need that to run it. Auto Prefixer is also included, and that's just a requirement by Tailwind CSS and PostCSS. It's another plugin. And then we're also installing concurrently, and we're going to be using this to allow us to run our Remix build and the Tailwind CSS build at the same time. That way we don't have to manually run the Tailwind build every time our styles change. So go ahead and hit enter on that, get those installed. And let's go ahead and read what's next on this. The next command is npx tailwind css init-p. That's going to initialize the Tailwind project within our application. And it'll give us a couple of configuration files that we're going to change here in just a second. So paste that command in, hit run. And these are the files that it's going to give us. It's got a post CSS config.js file, and this we're not going to touch. This is already set up how we need it. It shows here these are the two plugins that we're using. And then this Tailwind config.js file. This one is the one we're going to modify, and let's actually go back over to the instructions so we can see what we need. This first piece is the content key here. We're going to give it this little blob that's going to tell Tailwind which files in our application to look at. So if we paste that in here, now Tailwind, when it runs its process that determines which classes and utilities to bundle into its output file, it's only going to look at files within our app directory here that have these extensions at the end. So that's pretty nice. We get to set that up. The next piece is setting up the actual build scripts in our package JSON. So copy these over and open up your package.json, and this scripts section here, we can go ahead and remove what's there right now, and then just paste in these new ones that the instructions gave us. And the one that I like to call out right here is this guy, build::css. We see that this is doing the Tailwind CSS build. It's looking for a file in style/app.css, which does not exist yet. We're going to create that in just a second. And then it's going to output the Tailwind file in app/style/app.css. And it'll create that directory for us and that file for us once the build runs. So we just need to create this file here. And then right under that, you see this dev command. So when we run npm run dev, it's going to concurrently run the CSS dev build command and the remix dev build command. So we can get those going at the exact same time. But yeah, let's go ahead and create this new styles folder. And within that, we're going to put the app.css. And the reason we need this file here is that Tailwind CSS works off of a bunch of layers and utilities. And currently, we don't actually have any of those imported, so they're not being used anywhere. So we're going to look at this here and copy these over. This is the base set of utilities that we're going to need. I believe there's more out there, so if ever you needed more of those, you would add those here. But this is all we're going to need for our application, just the basics. And what happens with this is this file will get merged in with any of the other CSS that Tailwind generates for us. That way, once the output file is generated, it'll have all the tools it needs to actually run the CSS in the browser. So we've got that. The next thing we're going to need to do is just start up our dev server, npm run dev again. And we'll see right here, this styles folder was generated for us, and there should be some output in there. This is what Tailwind gave us. Now that's great. We have a CSS file. We have all these Tailwind CSS styles available to us, but we're not actually using that in our application. It's not being imported anywhere. So to do that, we're going to open up this root.tsx file. And we have this links component being imported by Remix. And this is where any resources can get loaded into the head. And this only exists in this one root.tsx file. And in order to add links to the head, we're going to need to import the links function type. And we're going to create a links function that returns our array of resources that we want to add to that head tag. So we'll go ahead and do that right here. And I think we can get that snippet for this over in the instructions. Yeah, they're right here. So I'll copy this over and paste it, and then we'll modify it a bit. So we're importing those styles, the outputted file right here, and then we're exporting a links function. Just to keep the conventions similar, I'm going to do export const instead of an actual function, and this will be a links function. And make this into a lambda. And there we go. So now we are exporting this links function, and that returns an array of various resources. Right now we just have the style sheet. And Remix is going to recognize this function being exported and load up all of those into this links section here. Now, if we wanted to, we could load up Tailwind CSS individually within the routes themselves. But if you do it here in this root.tsx file, it actually will be loaded up into any routes in the application. This is more of a global configuration, and that's what we want for this. So we'll go ahead and leave it that way. And if we want to test and make sure everything is working correctly, let's go ahead and open that index.tsx route file. I'm going to clear out the contents of it, and I'll get rid of some of these styles also. And let's give it some Tailwind classes. I'll do h-screen. That way our div is the height of the screen, and let's give it the full width of it. And let's give it a background of slate. Let's do 600. And then I'll give it an h2, and I'll say Tailwind CSS works. and give it a class name here as well. And for here, I'll do, let's say, font bold and text 5XL, make it really big. And then I think it's text blue, and let's do 400 here. So if we go back into the browser, this should be rendering with those styles applied. Let's see, I have to refresh. Yep, there we go. So this shows us that Tailwind CSS is configured and working. And now anytime we add Tailwind classes and utilities to our functions, Tailwind will scan through all of those files in the app directory and determine which pieces it needs to build into its output. And now that we've got that configured, the next piece we're going to set up is the MongoDB database. We're going to set that up so that we can connect to it via Prisma. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and use MongoDB's Atlas for setting up our database, and that allows us to set up a database really quickly and easily, and it's their cloud-hosted product. So I'll go ahead and switch tabs over to the Atlas dashboard. If you don't have an account already, feel free to create one. If you didn't have an account already, you're going to get to skip a couple of these steps that I'm going to go through right now, and I will signify when to keep following along. So if you did have an account, go ahead and up here in the left corner, hit this project drop down and add a new project. I'm going to name mine Kudos. Hit next. And then right here, it's adding you as a user. So you can hit create project. And then there's a build a database button. Click that one. Now, if you didn't have an account already, this is where you would end up landing after you've created your account. So this is where you'll want to start following along again. We're going to use this free tier and hit the create button. And then here it's going to give you a couple of configuration options. We're just going to stick with the defaults for now. We don't really need to change it for this application. The only thing you might change is the region that you're running your database cluster in. But for me, this one works out fine. So I'll hit create cluster. And then this is going to start provisioning the database cluster. But in the meantime, they have a security quick start that we'll go through where you set up a user and where you whitelist certain IP addresses that can connect to your database. So I'll create a user and I'll just auto-generate the password and copy that guy and then hit create user. And then the next piece is the IP address, and they have this nice button here where you can add your current IP address. That way the IP address of your current development computer is able to connect to this database and nothing else can. So this makes it nice and secure. And then we'll do finish and close. And then there's a second piece of configuration we're going to do while we're in here. If you hit the database access button and then find your new user, hit edit. And then you're going to see this built-in role drop down. If yours is not set to Atlas admin, you're going to want to switch it to that. Some of the database pushes that we're going to be doing from Prisma and even just connecting are going to require admin rights because we'll be making changes to our configurations and settings. So we'll need that. So go ahead and click that and then hit update user. And then, yeah, that should get us going there. We're going to see that our cluster is still being created, and now we're deploying those admin changes that we just made. So I'll go ahead and pause the video, and once that is finished, I'll be right back. All right, as promised, that took just about 2.5 minutes to finish up, and we now have a whole database running in the cloud for us. If we click this Browse Collections button here, we can see that we don't have any databases or collections yet, and we don't need to worry about that for now. When we set up Prisma, it'll create those for us. And actually, let's go ahead and do that now. Head back over to your code, and we'll be installing the Prisma CLI, and that'll give us access to various commands we can run to initialize Prisma and push our database changes. So I'll type npm i-d Prisma, and that'll install that. And then next I'll run npx prisma init, And then I'll pass it this flag also, data source provider, and type MongoDB. And what this will do is it'll initialize Prisma with a connection to MongoDB. If we didn't provide that, it would default to a Postgres setup. So go ahead and hit enter. And what you'll see is this creates a Prisma directory for us here. And within that is our schema file. And our provider is set up as MongoDB, and that's because we did that, that flag that we set up. The next piece here is the URL, and this is pointed to a database URL environment variable. And what this uses is Prisma schema language. It uses a function from that called env, and that's just a language that we're going to be using throughout this series to set up our data model and to map our collections and documents to what it'll look like in our database. So if we look over at .env, this is another file that was generated by the Prisma init. We'll see this database URL variable is defined here, and it gives us just this this starter URL, and we'll go ahead and clear that out because that points to nowhere for now. If we want to go back to the Mongo dashboard, we'll be able to get our connection string. So go ahead and hit connect here and connect your application. And then you can copy this over, and I'll paste this here. Basically, everything after this slash, we can delete. You'll see my first database right there. That's just a default database name. We'll go ahead and give it our own name. So we'll write kudos. Because with MongoDB, this database doesn't actually exist already in our database, but with MongoDB, if we provide it here, when we first try to connect or interact with our database, it'll create that for us. So I'll go ahead and hit save. And then the last piece here that we're going to need is my user's password. So I'll go over and I'll go in database access and find my user and hit edit. And then I'll hit edit password and I'll click copy. And it says copying failed. So I guess I'll go ahead and generate a new secure password. I'll hit copy and I'll save that. Let's see, so we'll go back over here and paste that there. And yes, I've shown you my password. I will be sure to change that before this video goes out. But anyway, so we've got that set up. So now Prisma should be able to connect to our database. The last thing we're going to need to do is set up an actual model within our Prisma schema. Prisma does not let you run any commands or connect to the database until you have at least one of these set up, because otherwise there's nothing really to connect to. So to do that, we'll use Prisma's schema language, and we'll do a model block, and I'm going to name it user. And what we're going to do here is set up a user model, which we're going to use in the next video of this series where we're setting up authentication. So we'll just start off a couple of the fields that we're going to want there. The very first one we're going to do is a unique ID, and that's because any model in Prisma needs to have a unique identifier in it. Otherwise, it won't work. It'll throw an error and complain at you. So we'll do ID, and then this will be a string ID. And then I'll do @ID, and this is a attribute that identifies this field as a unique identifier, our primary key. And then let's see, MongoDB auto-generates IDs for us, and they use an underscore ID column. So what we're going to do is within our Prisma client, we're going to have ID be our name, but in the underlying database, we'll be mapping it to the underscore ID column that Mongo already gives us. And then we're also going to want to default the value of this to auto, which will also allow us to make use of Mongo's auto-generated values. So this will pre-fill the ID with that field. And then lastly, the actual underlying data type of this ID is going to be object ID. That's something that Mongo provides for us. So I'll give it this db.objectID. And that will be the final setup for this field. And now any collection in a Mongo database in Prisma is going to need to have this pretty much exact setup because Mongo gives this ID to any record in a collection. And it does that across all of your collections. So this will be a pretty common thing to see. The next thing that we're going to do here is let's give our users an email. And that's going to be another string field. And in our application, the email is what's going to be used to log in. It'll be an email and password login. So we want to make sure that these emails are unique, and we can do the unique flag there for that. And the next one is we're going to need a password at some point. So we'll do password, and that'll be a string as well. That doesn't necessarily have to be unique because we're going to be hashing that, and so we don't know what value we're going to stick in there. So we'll go ahead and use that. And then let's go ahead and add two more fields. I'll do a created at field, and that'll be a date time. And how this is going to work is we're going to say that this will default to now. And so whenever a new user is created, the value of now, it's a current timestamp, will be stuck into that field, and then it won't be changed from then on. So that'll be how we know when the record was created. And similarly to that, we're going to do an updated at column, and that'll be another date time field. However, there's actually a function we can use to help us with this one. We'll do at updated at, and what that's going to do is anytime this database record is actually updated, Prisma is going to go ahead and update that value with a new current timestamp so that we can see when the last change was. And I think for now that's all we're going to need to do to our model. Let's go ahead and get those changes available in our database. And to do that, we can run the command npx prisma db push. And this will work a little bit differently than other DB pushes if you've used other databases in the past, more like relational databases like Postgres or MySQL. With those, when you do a DB push, it pushes your schema and it applies those schema changes to your database. And pretty much all is well after that. Normally you would use like a migration pattern using Prisma Migrate. But with Mongo, since it is a schemaless database, there's not an actual schema to apply changes to. This is more of an abstraction over it to help you as you develop to keep those types safe and to know what the shape of your data should look like. However, when we do a DB push here, it will create any new collections that you've defined in your schema and any new indexes. So in our case, we have defined the user collection, so it's going to go ahead and create a new collection for us there. And then when we use a unique flag, that's also an index that gets created behind the scenes. So it should create that for us as well. And I think, yeah, we'll see some output here if we do an npx prisma db push. So I'll go ahead and hit enter there. And this will go ahead and push our changes. And yeah, as you can see here, our user collection was created, and then our unique index on the email key was created as well. And then it went ahead and generated Prisma Client for us, which is nice. So now this is all set up to where we could start using the Prisma Client in our code. Our database connection is available, and our model is set up so that we can actually add data to that. And now if we want to go into the MongoDB dashboard again and look in our database, we can hit Browse Collections here. And yeah, we could see the Kudos database is there and our user collection. And right now it's empty. But if we go over to the indexes, we will see our user email key index that was created. So let's just check before we finish off here that this is actually all working. So if we want to run npx prisma studio in our terminal, this will open up Prisma Studio, which is just a GUI where you can interact with your data. You could do pretty much any CRUD operations. You can create data, read data, update things, and delete them. And you can also look at more complex pieces of data with relations and embedded documents and things like that. So let's go ahead and pop that open and see what we get. When we first open it up, you're going to see all models here, and I'm just going to go ahead and select the user one. And I'm going to add a record. And for the ID, we can see here that it's set to auto, which is correct. For the email, I'll just do test@gmail.com. And I'll give it a random password for now because this will eventually be a hashed value. For created at, it's using the now function as we defined, and then updated at has the timestamp of when we clicked our button, which is correct there. That's when we caused our update. So I'll save these changes. And now we've got this record here, and let's just double check in our Mongo database that this is correct. Yep, so that was stored in Mongo. And so yeah, now we have Prisma set up and connected and successfully storing data. So at this point, we have a pretty good foundation to build the rest of our application off of. And in our next piece of this series, we're going to actually put the Prisma client to use and start building out some queries that store and retrieve data from MongoDB. All right, guys, that's all we're doing for this video. We have set up our Remix project. We got Tailwind configured. We set up our MongoDB database, and then we set up Prisma within our project to actually connect to that database and start storing some data. In the next video of this series, we're going to set up authentication in our application, and we'll be using Prisma to store our user details and setting up session-based authentication for our website. So I look forward to going into that with you, and until next time.